The Nintendo Switch is already almost 3 years old and has gained an impressive game library, as well as sold really well. The Switch has managed to bring console-level games to the portable world, the likes of which we've never seen before. This is a really cool console. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're taking a look at the Nintendo Switch. Is it still worth buying in 2020? Now, some might already be running to the comments to type out that indeed the Nintendo Switch is obviously worth buying, and I would agree, it really is. This is an amazing machine. However, I do think it's worth talking about, especially because there is some competition in the market now, also from Nintendo, being the Nintendo Switch Lite. The Switch Lite is the Switch but colorful, and also it can't connect to your TV. This is not the Switch for the majority of people, as a lot of the appeal for the Switch is that it can, well, switch. The Switch Lite is probably best for someone younger or someone who only wants to play games like Breath of the Wild on the go. When in doubt, I'd buy the regular Switch because at least then you have the choice of using your TV if you want to. The regular Switch is $100 more than the Switch Lite, coming in at $300, which honestly is a pretty fair price for what you get, and so for most people I would recommend the regular Switch. If anything, the Nintendo Switch is more worth buying now than it ever has been thanks to the huge backlog of games, and I'll get to those. But I did want to quickly mention, if you want to buy a Switch, make sure you get one in a red box. These models have upgraded batteries and slightly upgraded screens, so they really are worth buying over the older white box models, and if you see those still in stock at stores, which you probably won't, try to look for a red one instead. Just want to throw that out there. If you're maybe considering a Switch over a PS4 or Xbox One, buy the Switch. Both PlayStation and Xbox are going to be releasing new consoles at the end of the year, whereas Nintendo won't. There might be a pro release of the Nintendo Switch at some point, but it likely won't be a huge upgrade, and even if it is, it'll probably cost more than this Switch anyways, so really this Switch is worth buying, and it's worth buying right now. This is a console that even if you have a PlayStation or Xbox, you should still kind of buy. It brings completely different games, namely being Nintendo ones, and that's something that just doesn't exist on other platforms. Not only does it have great single player games, it also has multiplayer games, something that PlayStation and Xbox isn't really good with, at least local multiplayer. Like Super Smash Bros, you can have up to 8 players, which is absolutely insane, and can only be found on Switch. Look, if you haven't been convinced already, you probably won't be. But the Nintendo Switch has been a good pickup since its launch and has only gotten better in the last 3 years. But if you want to hear more about the Switch, let's back up and start with the design. The Switch is essentially a small tablet with 2 halves of a controller slapped on the sides. It's a pretty basic looking machine, but it's also quite clever design. The controllers can be slid off to form one bigger controller, or if you'd rather, you can use them separately in some multiplayer games if multiple people need controllers. Sliding the controllers on and off is easy to do and very satisfying, so huge props to Nintendo for smart design. The Switch itself is quite light, and while the bezels are a bit thick, the overall form factor is pretty solid. On the bottom of the Switch we have the USB-C charging port. USB-C is nice because if you have an Android phone or maybe a MacBook Pro, the charger for it can probably charge the Switch as well. At the top we have power and volume buttons, the speaker grill, headphone jack, and the game slot. This is where you would stick the game cartridges in. While we at least do have a headphone jack, we unfortunately can't use Bluetooth headphones, like AirPods for example, so that does kind of suck. You could get a headphone jack to Bluetooth adapter, but that's about it. On the back we have the Switch logo, a couple more speaker grills, and a kickstand. You can flip the kickstand out so the Switch will stand on its own, which is really handy when you don't want to play on the TV, but also don't want to play it as a handheld. The big problem with this stand is that you can't charge the Switch while using it. Under the stand we actually have a micro SD card slot. This allows for pretty cheap expandable storage, so that's nice to see. If you want to download games, you definitely need to get an SD card. Moving to the front of the Switch, we have that 6.2-inch LCD display that has a resolution of 1280 by 720. Now I'm not gonna lie, this isn't the nicest screen in the world, but games typically look pretty good on it to my eye, and if the display was pumping more pixels, the battery life would suffer dramatically. Could it be better? Absolutely, but it also could be a whole lot worse. The Switch can output to 1080p at 60 FPS via HDMI when it's docked for TV mode, and what I love about it is how smooth most games are for it, at least the first party ones. Especially especially Smash Brothers. I've played 8-player games with all ice climbers, and there were very few frame drops, which is insanely impressive. And there are some pretty crazy games that can actually run on here. The Witcher 3 is a good example. It definitely doesn't look as good as it might on a normal console, but the fact that a game this massive can run at all on the Switch is pretty awesome. The battery inside typically should get you anywhere from 3 to 5 hours of playtime, although if you have a newer Switch that might be a bit better. Honestly, battery life has never been the Switch's strong suit, and games like Zelda will kill it fairly quickly. But I'd imagine it should get you through most play sessions, and when it's docked you don't have to worry about the battery at all, which is nice. Speaking of the dock, it's essentially a plastic box you slide the Switch into. Be careful when docking it, the Switch's screen will scratch pretty easily if you're too rough. For what it is, the dock does the job. On the side we have 2 USB ports typically used for charging controllers, and on the back, once we open it up, we have HDMI output, a USB-C charging input port to power everything, and another basic USB port. The dock is included with every Nintendo Switch, so you don't have to worry about buying it separately. Let's go over the controllers. We have JoyCons, which came with the console, and are kind of the ones you think of when it comes to the Switch. They obviously can slide onto the sides of the Switch, as said before, and they can also be used with this controller housing that comes with the Switch as more of a typical controller. You can also get one of these that'll charge the JoyCons while you play, but those are sold separately. The great thing about JoyCons is for multiplayer games, they each can be used as a single controller. You can slide these bumpers on to make it a bit more comfortable, and then there you go. You only need 2 sets of JoyCons to play 4-player titles, and 4 sets of JoyCons to play 8-player games like Smash Brothers. If JoyCons aren't your thing, there is a Switch Pro controller you can pick up. If you're into playing your Switch docked on your TV, I strongly recommend buying it. I personally find it much more comfortable, and if you play Xbox or PlayStation a lot, it'll just feel more natural. That said, JoyCons are pretty great too, and it is nice to have some selection here, even if they all are very expensive. But the controllers would be pointless without games to control, and luckily the Switch has a lot of them. From first-party Nintendo titles like Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Smash Bros., Mario Kart, Luigi's Mansion 3, Super Mario Maker 2, Pokemon Sword and Shield, and so on and so forth. There's so many games you can sink your time into. And that's just some of the Nintendo titles. We also have other popular games like Skyrim, Witcher 3, Doom, Overwatch, Minecraft, Civilization 6, Cuphead. Honestly, there's no end to great games for this console, and the list is growing constantly. If you want to play online, you do have to get an online subscription for the Switch. However, it is extremely reasonably priced, being $20 US for an entire year. If you want to get a family membership so you can use multiple accounts, it's only $35 US. That is an insanely good deal, and you also get access to old NES titles. Honestly, if you feel like playing online, there's really no reason not to get the subscription. It's so cheap compared to PlayStation and Xbox, and it provides a lot of value. It definitely isn't necessary though if you don't play online or only play single player games, but if you want to do things like trading in Pokemon, I believe you need to have a subscription for, and so on and so forth. Honestly, at the end of the day, the Nintendo Switch is just worth buying. No, it's not as powerful as the PS4 or Xbox One, and it is going to be really behind when the next generation of consoles come out later this year, but you don't play the Switch for the best graphics out there. You play the Switch to have good local multiplayer games. You play it to have Nintendo games. You play the Switch to play portably. That's something you can't do with anything else. The Switch is in a league of its own. It's not really supposed to be comparable to PS4 or Xbox or even PC. It's its own machine, and that's why for almost everybody, I'd say the Switch is worth buying. Because it doesn't matter what console or what gaming PC you already have, without the Switch, you're really missing out on a lot. And so yes, the Nintendo Switch is worth buying in 2020, and it probably will be in 2021 and 2022 as well. It's really nice to see that Nintendo is finally at the forefront of gaming again, and that they've really done something right with the Switch. The Wii U was a bit of a mess, and it's nice to see they've really seemed to figure things out. Anyways, with that, I think I'm pretty much done here. Do you have a Nintendo Switch? Are you thinking about getting one? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful or interesting, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tech-focused content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech if you'd like to for some reason. And with that all being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91tech, and I will see you all next time.